but I knew that if I didn't say it, that I would do it. And I just didn't want to.
Prince William has officially blocked Meghan Markle from returning to Britain after security officials declared her a risk event. And the reasons are shocking. This isn't just a family drama, it's far more serious. Meghan's plans to build her public image are now at risk. Could she still find a way back? What does this mean for Harry, their children, and the royal family? This announcement didn't just shatter hopes of reconciliation, it also threatened to strain Meghan's marriage. But what consequences follow this decision? Let's find out. The secret return plan. Meghan Markle sat in her home office in Montecito, California, reviewing plans for what she hoped would be her triumphant return to Britain after years of exile and negative publicity. She had been working with a small team of public relations advisors on a strategy to rehabilitate her image in the country that had once welcomed her as a fairy tale princess, but had turned against her after she and Harry left royal duties. Meghan believed that the key to changing public perception was to remind people of her charitable work and to show herself as a caring, engaged person rather than the difficult and demanding figure that tabloid coverage had portrayed. The plan centered around a major charity event scheduled for early December in London. The event supported causes related to women's education and empowerment, issues that Meghan had championed during her time as a working royal. Meghan had quietly contacted the charity organizers and offered to attend the event as a surprise guest. The organizers were thrilled at the prospect of having someone with Meghan's international profile appear at their fundraiser. They agreed to keep her participation secret until the day of the event, when her presence would be revealed to maximum publicity effect. Meghan envisioned arriving at the event to gasps and excitement from the attendees. She would give a moving speech about the importance of supporting women and girls. Photographers who had been tipped off by her team would capture images of Meghan looking elegant and engaged. The positive coverage would be shared across media outlets and would remind people of why they had initially been excited when Harry married her. Meghan hoped that this carefully orchestrated appearance would be the first step in a longer campaign to rebuild her reputation in Britain. But the charity event was only part of Meghan's plan. She also intended to use the trip as an opportunity to see King Charles and to bring her children to meet their grandfather. Meghan reasoned that Charles had not seen Archie in years and had never met Lilibet in person. She believed that if she could arrange for Charles to spend time with his grandchildren, it would soften his attitude toward her and might create an opening for reconciliation. Meghan thought that Charles's natural affection for his grandchildren would overcome whatever negative feelings he had about her and about the conflicts of the past few years. Meghan's team booked private flights to Britain and arranged for accommodations at an exclusive hotel in central London. They coordinated with friendly journalists who would be given advance notice of Meghan's arrival and who could be counted on to provide sympathetic coverage of her visit. Everything was planned in careful detail to maximize the positive impact and to control the narrative around Meghan's return. She intended to present herself as someone who had been unfairly criticized, but who remained committed to doing good work and who wanted to reconnect with her British roots. The one element that Meghan deliberately left out of her planning was any coordination with the royal family or with British security officials. Meghan knew that if she asked permission to visit or if she informed the palace about her plans, she would likely be told not to come. Charles and William had made clear through various statements and actions that Meghan was not welcome at royal events or properties. But Meghan believed that if she simply showed up and created positive publicity through her charity work, the family would have to accept her presence and might even appreciate her efforts to rebuild her image. Meghan rationalized her decision not to inform the palace by telling herself that she was a private citizen who did not need permission to travel to Britain. She was not asking for royal protection or for any official support. She would be attending a private charity event and would be staying at a hotel rather than at any royal property. In Meghan's mind, this was not a royal visit, but rather a personal trip by someone who happened to have once been married into the royal family. She convinced herself that the palace had no right to try to control her movements or to tell her where she could and could not go. Harry had serious reservations about Meghan's plan from the beginning. He warned her that showing up in Britain without coordination with security officials could create problems. He reminded her that the British tabloid media would certainly find out about her visit and would likely create negative coverage rather than the positive stories she was hoping for. Harry also expressed doubt that Charles would react well to being surprised with a visit from grandchildren he barely knew, rather than having time to prepare for such a meeting. But Meghan dismissed Harry's concerns and told him that he was being too pessimistic and too influenced by his family's negative attitudes toward her. As the date for the planned trip approached, Meghan became increasingly excited and confident about her strategy. She rehearsed the speech she would give at the charity event. She selected outfits that would photograph well and that would send the right messages about her style and her values. She prepared gifts that she would bring to Charles from the children. Meghan allowed herself to imagine how good it would feel to walk into a room in Britain and receive applause and positive attention rather than criticism and hostility. She was convinced that this trip would mark the beginning of her redemption and her return to public life on her own terms. However, this plan did not remain a secret for long. Intelligence services discover the plan. British intelligence services routinely monitored communications and activities related to the royal family as part of their responsibility for protecting the monarchy and maintaining national security. This monitoring included tracking potential threats from extremists or unstable individuals who might pose danger to members of the royal family. It also involved keeping aware of activities by former royals or people connected to the family who might create security challenges or public order concerns. Meghan's communications with her team and with contacts in Britain were picked up through this routine monitoring. An analyst reviewing intercepted communications noticed references to travel plans and to a high-profile individual arriving in London for a charity event. Further investigation revealed that the person being discussed was Meghan Markle, and that she was planning to enter Britain within a matter of days. The analyst immediately flagged this information as potentially significant because Meghan's arrival without proper coordination could create various problems. The information was passed up the chain of command to senior security officials who had responsibility for threat assessment and for protecting the royal family. Senior officials at MI5, Britain's domestic security service, held an urgent meeting to discuss the implications of Meghan's planned visit. They reviewed intelligence about public attitudes toward Meghan and about various groups that had expressed strong negative feelings toward her. The officials were concerned that if Meghan's presence in Britain became known, it could trigger protests or confrontations between her supporters and her critics. Britain had experienced periods of social tension related to debates about the royal family, and officials worried that Meghan's return could inflame these divisions. The security assessment identified several specific risks associated with Meghan's unannounced visit. First, there was the possibility of protests at any location where Meghan appeared. Groups that blamed Meghan for damaging the monarchy's reputation had previously organized demonstrations expressing their anger toward her. If these groups learned that Meghan was in the country and where she would be appearing, they might organize protests that could turn confrontational or even violent. Second, there was concern about Meghan's own safety if she appeared in public without adequate security protection. While most British people would simply ignore her or express their opinions peacefully, there was always the risk that an unstable individual might try to harm her. Meghan had received death threats in the past, and security officials took these threats seriously even if they believed the actual risk was low. Meghan's decision to visit without coordinating with protection officers meant that she would not have the level of security that normally surrounded high-profile individuals with known threats against them. Third, the security officials worried about the drain on police resources that would result from having to protect Meghan and manage any protests or crowds that gathered around her appearances. British police forces were already stretched thin, dealing with regular crime and with protecting working members of the royal family who had legitimate claims to taxpayer-funded security. Having to divert officers to deal with Meghan's self-created security situation would take resources away from other important duties. The intelligence services also discovered that Meghan planned to bring her children to visit King Charles. This aspect of the plan created additional security concerns because protecting children required even more careful planning than protecting adults. The officials worried that Meghan had not thought through the logistics of moving around Britain with young children who would need their own security arrangements. They also questioned whether it was appropriate for Meghan to use her children as tools to gain access to Charles when the king had not requested such a visit. Beyond the immediate security concerns, the officials worried about the political implications of Meghan's return. the British government had been dealing with ongoing debates about the role and funding of the monarchy. Meghan's controversial status and her history of making accusations against the royal family had contributed to public skepticism about whether the institution deserved continued support. If Meghan returned and created chaos or controversy, it could further damage the monarchy's standing and could complicate the government's efforts to build public support for the institution. The security assessment concluded that Meghan's planned visit constituted what officials termed a risk event. This designation meant that her presence in Britain would create security challenges, potential threats to public order, and resource demands that outweighed any legitimate purpose for her visit. The assessment recommended that Meghan be strongly discouraged from proceeding with her plans and that she be denied any official security protection or support if she chose to visit against the advice of authorities. The intelligence services briefed senior palace officials about their assessment and their concerns. They explained that Meghan's uncoordinated arrival could create exactly the kind of chaos and negative publicity that everyone wanted to avoid. The palace officials agreed that Meghan's plan was problematic and that steps needed to be taken to prevent her from proceeding. The question was who had the authority and the willingness to directly confront Meghan and make clear that her visit was not acceptable. William's emergency intervention. Prince William was attending a meeting about his environmental initiatives when one of his private secretaries interrupted to inform him about urgent security matters that required his immediate attention. William excused himself from the meeting and went to a private office where senior security officials were waiting to brief him about Meghan's planned secret visit to Britain. As the officials explained what they had learned about Meghan's intentions and about their assessment of the risks her visit would create, William's expression became increasingly angry and determined. William viewed Meghan's plan as exactly the kind of manipulative behavior that he had come to expect from her over the years since she married Harry. He believed that Meghan was trying to force her way back into British public life without earning the right to return through changed behavior or genuine reconciliation efforts. William saw the plan to surprise everyone with her appearance at a charity event as a publicity stunt designed to generate sympathetic coverage while avoiding any accountability for the accusations and attacks she had directed at the royal family. The aspect of Meghan's plan that made William most angry was her intention to bring Archie and Lilibet to visit Charles without any advance warning or coordination. William viewed this as emotional manipulation, using innocent children as tools to try to break down Charles's resistance to engaging with Meghan. William knew that his father had been hurt by being cut off from his grandchildren and that seeing them would be emotionally powerful for Charles. But William believed that Meghan had no right to use that dynamic to force contact when she had been responsible for creating the separation in the first place. William immediately called an emergency meeting with his most senior advisors, with representatives from the intelligence services and with officials responsible for royal security. He made clear from the beginning of the meeting that he wanted Meghan's visit blocked and that he was prepared to use whatever authority he had to make sure she did not proceed with her plan. William told the assembled officials that allowing Meghan to return to Britain on her own terms would set a terrible precedent and would reward the very behavior that had damaged the monarchy's reputation. The security officials explained to William that they had the authority to designate Meghan's visit as a risk event and to deny her taxpayer-funded protection. But they did not have the legal authority to prevent her from entering the country as she was still a British resident with the right to travel there. William asked whether there were other mechanisms that could be used to discourage or prevent her visit. His advisors discussed various options, including having immigration officials question her extensively upon arrival, or having police indicate publicly that they could not guarantee her safety if she proceeded with public appearances. William rejected these indirect approaches as insufficient. He wanted to send an unmistakable message to Meghan that she was not welcome and that her attempt to return would be blocked. William instructed his staff to contact Meghan's representatives directly and inform them that Meghan's planned visit was unacceptable and that she needed to cancel her plans immediately. He wanted Meghan to understand that he personally was behind this intervention and that his opposition to her return was absolute. The meeting discussed how to frame the communication to Meghan in terms that would be legally defensible and that would not create opportunities for her to claim she was being treated unfairly. The officials drafted language explaining that Meghan's uncoordinated arrival would create security challenges that British authorities were not prepared to manage. They emphasized that her presence would drain resources needed to protect working royals and would create potential public order problems. The communication would make clear that if Meghan proceeded with her visit despite these warnings, she would do so without any official protection or support. William also instructed his staff to communicate with King Charles about the situation. He wanted to make sure that his father understood what Meghan was planning, and that Charles would not be swayed by the emotional appeal of seeing his grandchildren and accept Meghan's manipulation. William spoke directly with Charles and explained his assessment that Meghan's surprise visit was a calculated move, designed to force contact and generate publicity, rather than a genuine attempt at reconciliation. Charles agreed with William's reading of the situation and supported the decision to block Meghan's return. The palace prepared an official security assessment document that designated Meghan's planned visit as a risk event. The document outlined the specific concerns about protests, security resource allocation, and potential threats to public order. It concluded that Meghan's presence in Britain would create unacceptable complications and that she should be strongly advised against proceeding with her travel plans. The document was shared with relevant government officials to ensure that everyone involved in security and public order matters understood the palace's position. William personally authorized a direct communication to Meghan's representatives, making clear that her visit was not welcome and explaining the security designation that had been applied to her planned activities. The message was blunt and unambiguous. Meghan was being told that if she came to Britain, she would face a hostile reception, no official support, and potential confrontations with protesters. The palace was making clear that William had the power to make her visit miserable, and that he was prepared to use that power. For William, blocking Meghan's return was about more than just this specific visit. He wanted to establish clearly that Meghan would not be allowed to return to Britain on her own terms without addressing the damage she had done through her accusations and her attacks on the family. William believed that until Meghan acknowledged her role in creating the conflicts and offered genuine apologies for the harm she had caused, she had no right to expect to be welcomed back. The security designation and the blocked visit were William's way of enforcing consequences and making clear that Meghan's actions had permanently altered her relationship with Britain and with the royal family. The official security designation. A formal security assessment designated Meghan as a risk event ahead of a planned visit to the UK. Prepared by the Joint Terrorism Analysis Centre, in coordination with MI5 and the Metropolitan Police's Royalty and Specialist Protection Unit, the document ran for several dozen pages, though much of it remained classified. The executive summary was shared with palace officials and Meghan's representatives to explain why authorities advised against her visit. The assessment reviewed Meghan's history with the British public and media since her marriage to Prince Harry. While she initially received positive attention, public opinion had turned sharply negative after she and Harry stepped back from royal duties and publicly criticized the family. Polling data showed that a significant portion of the population opposed Meghan strongly enough to potentially protest or demonstrate against her. Specific extremist groups and individuals who had previously made threats toward Meghan were also highlighted. While most were deemed low probability for actual violence, officials warned that unplanned public appearances could give unstable individuals an opportunity to act. Meghan had not coordinated her visit with security officers, meaning she would lack the protection usually provided to someone facing credible threats. A major focus of the assessment was the strain her visit would place on police resources. Protecting Meghan at her planned charity event would require dozens of officers to screen attendees, manage crowds, and respond to protests or incidents. Additional personnel would be needed for any other public appearances or travel around London, potentially diverting officers from other essential duties. The assessment also noted political and diplomatic complications. Meghan's visit would attract international media attention, likely highlighting controversies rather than charitable work. This could undermine the government's efforts to maintain a stable image of the country and monarchy, creating awkwardness in countries where opinions on the royal family were already divided. Recommendations were clear. Meghan should receive no taxpayer-funded security protection, police should publicly clarify that her safety could not be guaranteed, and immigration officials should question her extensively, While she could not be legally prevented from entering Britain, authorities could make the visit sufficiently difficult to encourage reconsideration. Special concern was raised about Meghan bringing her children to see King Charles. Protecting young children required specialized security measures, and officials warned that allowing a surprise visit could set a dangerous precedent, letting people bypass standard security protocols. The assessment concluded that Meghan should be directly informed of these concerns and strongly advised to cancel her trip. Palace officials used the document to communicate with her representatives, emphasizing that proceeding would be at her own risk and without official support. The message detailed potential consequences: no security, protests at events, negative media attention, and extended questioning by immigration officials. Her team was given 48 hours to confirm the cancellation. Failure to respond would lead authorities to assume the visit would go ahead, triggering measures to manage security challenges. The communication left Meghan with a clear choice: cancel her trip or proceed without protection, facing both logistical and safety risks. But how did Meghan respond to this? Meghan's furious response. Meghan was in her kitchen making breakfast when her phone rang with a call from the head of her public relations team. The tone in her advisor's voice immediately told Meghan that something had gone seriously wrong with the careful plans they had been developing for weeks. As her advisor explained that the palace had discovered their plans and that British security officials had designated her visit as a risk event, Meghan felt shock and disbelief flooding through her. She asked her advisor to repeat what she was saying because the information seemed too outrageous to be real. When the full situation became clear, and Meghan understood that William had personally intervened to block her return to Britain, she became angrier than the people around her had seen her in years. Meghan felt that this was a vindictive abuse of power designed solely to hurt her and to prevent her from rebuilding her reputation. She could not accept that there were legitimate security concerns about her visit. In Meghan's mind, the security designation was just an excuse that William was using to punish her for leaving royal life and for speaking honestly about her experiences. Meghan immediately called an emergency meeting with her lawyers and her public relations advisors to discuss how to respond to this situation. She wanted to know whether she had any legal recourse to challenge the security designation or to force British authorities to allow her to visit without interference. Her lawyers explained that security matters were largely at the discretion of professional officials, and that challenging their assessments would be extremely difficult. Courts were generally reluctant to second-guess security professionals about threat levels and resource requirements. The lawyers also pointed out that Britain had no legal obligation to provide Meghan with security protection even if she was facing threats. As someone who had left royal duties and who no longer performed any official functions, Meghan had no automatic right to taxpayer-funded protection. The decision to classify her visit as a risk event and to deny her security resources was within the authority of the relevant officials. Meghan would have a very hard time proving that this decision was legally improper rather than just personally upsetting to her. Meghan rejected her lawyer's cautious advice and insisted that she wanted to fight back against what she saw as William's abuse of power. She told her team to prepare a public statement that would expose what was happening and that would generate sympathy for her situation. Meghan believed that if the public knew that William was blocking her from visiting Britain and from doing charitable work, people would see him as cruel and would rally to her support. She thought that public pressure might force William to back down and allow her visit to proceed. The statement that Meghan's team drafted was emotional and accusatory. It claimed that Meghan had been planning a private visit to Britain to support charitable causes and to allow her children to meet their grandfather. The statement said that she had been shocked to learn that security officials had designated her as a risk event, despite the fact that she posed no threat to anyone and simply wanted to do good work. The statement suggested that the security designation was politically motivated and was being used as a weapon to prevent her from entering the country. Meghan's statement went on to accuse Prince William by name of being behind this decision. She claimed that William was abusing his position and his influence over security officials to pursue a personal vendetta against her. The statement said that William's actions were preventing innocent children from having a relationship with their grandfather and were denying British charities the opportunity to benefit from Meghan's support and publicity. Meghan characterized William's intervention as petty, vindictive, and unworthy of someone who would someday be king. The statement concluded with Meghan saying that she was deeply disappointed by this treatment and that it proved that the royal family was more interested in punishing perceived disloyalty than in supporting charitable work or maintaining family relationships. Meghan said she remained committed to her causes and to doing good in the world, but that she had been forcibly prevented from contributing in Britain by people who cared more about control and revenge than about the values they claimed to represent. When Meghan's statement was released to the media, it created an immediate sensation and sparked intense debate. News organizations around the world covered the story of William blocking Meghan's return and the security designation that had been applied to her planned visit. Some coverage was sympathetic to Meghan and portrayed her as a victim of continued harassment by a family that had never accepted her. Other coverage was more skeptical and questioned why Meghan thought she could visit Britain without coordination after years of attacking the royal family publicly. British tabloid newspapers were particularly harsh in their coverage of Meghan's statement. They published articles suggesting that Meghan had no right to complain about being unwelcome when she had spent years criticizing Britain and the royal family. The tabloids pointed out that Meghan's plan to show up unannounced demonstrated her characteristic disregard for rules and protocols. Some articles suggested that the security concerns about her visit were legitimate, given the strong feelings that many British people had about her. Meghan's supporters organized on various platforms to defend her and to criticize William's actions. They argued that preventing someone from visiting their own father-in-law and from bringing children to see their grandfather was cruel regardless of past conflicts. Supporters pointed out that Meghan had every right to travel to Britain and that the security designation seemed designed to harass her rather than to address genuine safety concerns. The debate became heated and polarized, with both sides convinced that they were right and that the other side was being completely unreasonable. The controversy put Harry in an impossible position. Would he stand by his wife or his family? Harry's impossible position. Prince Harry sat alone in his home office, staring at his phone. Dozens of messages from friends, colleagues, and media contacts had flooded in, all asking for his reaction to the news that Meghan had been blocked from returning to Britain. He felt torn between his loyalty and love for his wife and his complicated feelings toward his family. Meghan expected him to fully support her and to publicly condemn William's actions, but Harry also understood that some of his brother's concerns were not entirely unfounded. Still, the way William had handled the situation publicly, bluntly, and without nuance felt unnecessarily harsh. Harry remembered warning Meghan from the beginning that her plan to return to Britain unannounced was risky. He had urged her to coordinate with palace officials and security services before attempting to travel. Having lived through British security protocols himself, he knew how seriously authorities took the protection of high-profile figures. Meghan's decision to ignore these precautions and simply show up was naive, and it created exactly the type of problems Harry had feared. Yet, Harry couldn't ignore the anger simmering inside him toward William. Even acknowledging legitimate security concerns, he believed his brother had taken pleasure in publicly humiliating Meghan, reinforcing her status as an outsider and sending a clear message that she was not welcome in the country. Being officially labeled a risk event felt like a personal attack designed to shame her and control her ability to travel. Harry thought William could have managed the situation discreetly, avoiding yet another media storm. The hardest part for Harry was Meghan's plan to bring their children to see King Charles. He desperately wanted Archie and Lilibet to know their grandfather and cousins. When Meghan suggested the children be part of the visit, Harry felt torn. He hoped it might open a path to reconciliation, but he worried that using the children as leverage could backfire and be perceived as manipulative. Now that the visit had been blocked, Harry felt grief over another lost opportunity for his children to connect with their British family. He blamed both Meghan and William. Meghan for failing to coordinate properly, and William for denying the children access along with their mother. Both sides seemed more concerned with scoring points than doing what was best for the next generation, leaving Harry feeling frustrated and helpless. Meghan confronted Harry directly about his loyalties. She demanded that he issue a statement condemning William's actions and defending her right to visit Britain. According to Meghan, if Harry truly loved her, he would side with her rather than attempt to remain neutral. She accused him of always excusing his family's behavior and failing to fully defend her in public, despite the attacks she faced. Harry tried to explain that a public confrontation with William would only escalate tensions and make reconciliation impossible. He pointed out that some connection to the royal family remained necessary for their public profile and business opportunities, and that burning bridges completely could have long-term consequences. Despite his anger at William, Harry still loved his brother and could not bring himself to wage public war, even in defense of Meghan. Meghan's frustration boiled over. She was tired of being asked to understand Harry's family when they never understood her. She reminded him of the sacrifices she had made to marry him and accused him of prioritizing his family over their marriage. Both grew heated, saying things they would later regret, caught between love, loyalty, and anger. Eventually, Harry agreed to release a limited statement. It expressed disappointment at the situation without directly blaming William, noting that he was sad the children would miss seeing their grandfather and that he hoped the family could eventually find a way to maintain relationships for their sake. The statement satisfied neither Meghan nor William, but Harry felt it was the only responsible choice given the impossible position he occupied. The conflict over Meghan's blocked visit strained their marriage. Arguments about how to handle the royal tensions became frequent. Meghan felt Harry's stance was insufficiently supportive, while Harry felt Meghan was too confrontational and unwilling to recognize her role in the situation. Both felt misunderstood and unsupported. Harry began questioning whether the life they were building independence in America while remaining entangled with the royal family was sustainable or healthy. Should they fully reconcile with the family and return to Britain, or cut ties completely and disregard British opinion and access? The middle ground seemed to breed only stress and conflict. Meghan refused to consider either extreme. She wanted the option to return on her own terms, resenting William's power to block her. She began exploring legal or political measures to challenge the security designation. Her lawyers warned the options were difficult, costly, and unlikely to succeed, but Meghan was determined to pursue them regardless. The impasse left Harry caught between his love for his wife, his loyalty to his brother, and the impossible realities of their divided family. However, the decision that followed from the royal family left Meghan in shock. The permanent ban and its consequences. Prince William made his position absolutely clear through official palace statements and through private communications to government officials who had responsibility for security and immigration matters. Meghan would not be welcome to return to Britain as long as William had any influence over such decisions. The effective ban on Meghan's presence in the country was not a formal legal restriction because British authorities could not prevent a resident from entering. But it was a practical reality enforced through security designations, denial of protection resources, and clear statements that her presence would not be supported or facilitated. William instructed palace communications staff to make his reasoning clear when discussing the situation with media outlets that covered royal affairs. He wanted people to understand that Meghan had brought this outcome on herself through years of attacks on the royal family and through her current attempt to manipulate public opinion by showing up unannounced at a charity event. William believed that Meghan had demonstrated repeatedly that she could not be trusted to act in good faith or to respect normal boundaries and protocols. Until she fundamentally changed her behavior and made genuine amends for the harm she had caused, she would not be allowed to casually return to Britain as if nothing had happened. The permanent nature of William's opposition to Meghan's return became clear when palace sources revealed that he had instructed staff to maintain the security risk designation indefinitely. Any future attempt by Meghan to visit Britain would trigger the same response, with authorities making clear that she would receive no support or protection and that her presence would be strongly discouraged. William wanted Meghan to understand that this was not just about blocking one specific visit, but rather about establishing a permanent consequence for her actions and her refusal to reconcile properly with the family. The practical implications of being effectively banned from Britain were significant and far-reaching for Meghan. She would not be able to attend important family events, including christenings of William's children, royal weddings, or potentially even funerals of family members. If King Charles became seriously ill or passed away, Meghan would have to make a difficult choice between staying away from the funeral or attending despite knowing she would be unwelcome and would receive hostile treatment. The ban meant that Meghan was truly separated from the royal family in ways that went beyond just living in a different country. The consequences for Archie and Lilibet were particularly painful. The children would grow up unable to visit Britain and unable to have relationships with their grandfather, King Charles, their uncle William, or their cousins George, Charlotte, and Louis. They would miss out on experiencing their British heritage and on understanding the history and the family that was part of their identity. Meghan and Harry would have to explain to their children as they grew older why they were not welcome in the country where their father was born and why they could not see their royal relatives. The ban also affected Meghan's ability to pursue charitable work in Britain, which had been an important part of her plans for maintaining relevance and positive public presence. Many of the causes that Meghan cared about had strong British connections, and she had hoped to continue supporting these organizations through appearances and fundraising efforts. Being unable to travel to Britain meant that Meghan had to limit her charitable activities to other countries where she was more welcome, which reduced the scope and the impact of her work. Meghan's dream of eventually being accepted back into royal life and being able to rehabilitate her reputation in Britain was completely destroyed by William's permanent opposition to her return. She had imagined that with time and with positive work, she might be able to change public opinion and might eventually be welcomed back to participate in some royal events or to resume limited duties. But William's decision to block her access made clear that no amount of time or good behavior would change his fundamental position that Meghan had permanently disqualified herself from being part of the royal family's life in Britain. The situation forced Meghan to accept that her future was entirely separate from Britain and from the royal family. She would need to build her life, her career, and her identity in America without any realistic hope of returning to the country that had once seemed ready to embrace her as a princess. Meghan tried to frame this reality as liberating rather than limiting, telling friends that she was better off without the toxic royal family and without Britain's judgmental and racist society. But privately, Meghan grieved for the loss of opportunities and connections that she had once taken for granted. Harry struggled with the reality that William's ban on Meghan meant that his own family, his wife and children, were effectively exiled from Britain as long as William held power. Harry could theoretically visit Britain on his own, but doing so without Meghan and the children felt like betraying them and accepting the family's rejection of his wife. The situation left Harry feeling like he had to choose between his wife and his homeland, between his children and his father and brother, in ways that were painful and that left him feeling rootless and without a clear identity. The permanent rift between William and Meghan, enforced through the security designation and the effective ban on her return to Britain, became one of the defining features of this period in royal history.